Hey guys, welcome back to Follow Me 11B. Discussions on current events, macroeconomics, and freedom and liberty from a veteran's perspective. Today I wanted to discuss the American housing shortage. And I wanted to pose the question, why is there an American housing shortage? Why are there not enough houses in the United States that people need today? So, to start things off, let's go straight to an NPR news article from March 29th by Chris Arnold, entitled, "There's Never Been Such a Severe Shortage of Homes in the U.S. Here's why." Emerson Claus has been building houses for 45 years, but he's never faced delays like he is now trying to get basic building materials. I had a client ask me to add a door, he says, at a job site outside of Boston. We just waited 6 months to get it. That's a door in a frame, Claus says, exasperated. It's kind of crazy. He says appliances can be even worse. A dishwasher, if you can find the model you want right now, you might wait a year for it. By one estimate, the U.S. is more than 3 million homes short of the demand of would-be homebuyers. Pandemic-related supply chain problems aren't helping. They're adding tens of thousands of dollars in cost to the typical house. But the roots of the problem go back much further, to the housing bubble collapse in 2008. What I call a bloodbath happened, says Claus. It was the worst housing market crash since the Great Depression. Many home builders went out of business. Claus was building homes in Florida when the bottom fell out. A lot of my tradespeople found other work, went and got retrained for new jobs in law enforcement, all sorts of jobs, says Claus, so the workforce was somewhat decimated. A few years later, as Americans started buying more homes again, but building stayed below normal, and that slump in building has continued for more than a decade. Meanwhile, the largest generation, the millennials, started to settle down and buy houses. And that's the main reason we've ended up millions of homes short. Okay, I guess we can just end this video now because we've identified the problem and answered the question. Okay, NPR, let's just continue on here. Builders for many years just weren't building enough to keep up with demand. That lack of supply has pushed home prices to record levels, up nearly 20% last year alone. So let me reread that. That lack of supply since 2008 has pushed prices to record levels, up nearly 20% last year alone. So really, stop for a second, just think about that. Was this problem happening before 2020, like 2019, 2018, 2017, etc.? I mean, let's just think about it for a second. What was happening in 2020 that's different, that may have contributed to the prices going higher? Getting back to the article, though. Gradually, though, many home building companies recovered. Claus is now the president of the Home Builders and Remodelers Association of Massachusetts. Before the illness hit, he had a crew of 9 full-time workers again. That's not counting the many subcontractor, electrician, roofing, and plumbing companies he works on homes with. We always need guys, says Renee Lavender, Claus's foreman. He's originally from El Salvador, and for the past 10 years, he has helped Claus and other local builders find a lot of other workers to hire and train. I've been bringing guys to companies like maybe 200 guys in my whole construction experience. But then the pandemic hit. Things shut down and some of those workers left. Again, let's take a quick pause here and wait. Things shut down and some of those workers left. Why did they shut down? It was not then the pandemic hit and things shut down, like they wrote in the article. It was the pandemic hit and government mandated people don't work, go home, do not produce. That's why the workers left. That's why things shut down. But I digress. Now, with unemployment so low, Lavender can't find people to hire like he used to. It's a lot harder, he says. They've been finding other work. Or they may have stopped looking, stopped being counted in the unemployment figures. And, You may have heard this discussed on social media a lot lately in the last few weeks, months. I know I have, but I may have underestimated the power of during the stimulus checks, which I still think a lot of people are, burning through their stimulus savings, and they're probably close to the E on the gas tank of stimulus money at this point. I would have a hard time believing that they could get too much farther with it, with the exception if they used some of that money, some of the house's money, to invest in something like stocks or crypto. Um, and now, if you invested in stocks and crypto in the first part of 2020 and you held on to it, it's gone way up. It's gone up 2 times, 3 times, 4 times as much. So you might not feel like you need to work. You might actually not need to work at this point. Getting back to the article, Claus says that's made it more difficult for builders to respond to the surge in demand for homes during the pandemic. If I had twice as many guys, I would still not have enough, says Claus, who now has 5 employees. And my subcontractors, they're all hurting for people. There's another very big roadblock to home construction. Land, says Claus. I was just trying to buy a piece of land to build 5 homes on it. Unfortunately, that land went to somebody else who may put 1 or 2 on it. Claus says he wants to build more attached townhouses or smaller homes on less land. That's what many first-time homebuyers can afford to buy. But in many places, zoning rules won't let you buy land and divide it up. You can only build 1 house with a big yard. Overly restrictive zoning is a big problem nationally, says Robert Dietz, the chief economist with the National Association of Home Builders. In certain neighborhoods, you simply cannot build townhouses. You have to build a single-family unit on lots that are bigger than the market wants. This is not a free market choice. It's a government-imposed rule. Okay, maybe. I mean, I'm sure it is, but let me just say, central planning usually doesn't work completely as drawn out on paper, but I think more of it has to do with a profit factor for the builders, and more on that later. He says that in many parts of the country, the classic NIMBY, not in my backyard opposition, stops higher density units from being built. Existing homeowners who don't want more traffic or more homes in their neighborhood Existing homeowners who don't want more traffic and more homes in their neighborhood keep what he says are outdated exclusionary zoning rules in place. So to make a profit, builders like Claus are building renovations or teardowns and buying an older home, knocking it down, and building a bigger, more expensive new one. We are seeing a lot of knockdowns, Claus says, but it doesn't add to the housing stock. You're replacing something, you're not adding to it, so the net effect isn't the best. Changes in zoning can make a big difference. Some states and towns have been changing the rules to allow in-law rental apartments to be built onto existing houses. These are called accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. Here's a quote. 20% of remodelers indicate in the last year they've undertaken an ADU project, and the typical one can cost anywhere between $100,000 and $200,000, Dietz says. That's good for the supply of rental housing, which is also very tight, but Dietz says we also need a lot more homes for people to buy. That could be a townhouse, he says. It could be a single-family detached home on a small lot that's roughly 1,800 to 2,100 square feet. That's appropriate for effectively a newly married couple that's moving out of their first apartment and getting their first rung of home ownership. Right now, Claus says that because of the restrictive zoning rules, he doesn't have any new home projects lined up that will put a house like that in a place there wasn't a home already. So, again, the question, why is there an American housing shortage? And NPR, as we just went over, has some ideas. It sounds like land has a lot to do with it, in their opinion. It could have a portion to do with it. I would probably agree with that. But I think there's probably a few other reasons, like number one, government-ordered pandemic closures made a huge, created a huge supply chain bottleneck when people couldn't produce. They were ordered to go home and not produce. Now, and not only that, but then they received money. So let me get into that in a second here. So I think we're probably feeling the we might even be feeling the pandemic related bottleneck more today than we were when we were stuck in our houses back in 2020 when you couldn't find toilet paper on the shelves. Toilet paper wasn't on the shelves for a day or a week, but then we got it. Now you might have to wait a year for a dishwasher or 6 months for a door. So we might be feeling it more now. Number two, I think that the government stimulus checks, fattened everybody's bank accounts for a while. And when people weren't permitted to produce to go to work, instead they may have invested a lot, I think, it's highly likely, on Robinhood and on some other brokerage apps. And they're literally getting money from nothing. They're spending the house money the government sent to them and putting it in Robinhood stocks and even crypto. And I know a lot of people have been talking about this for the last few months. I probably did underestimate the effect of this because I thought that the stimulus checks would have probably dried up by now. But when you think you may have gone up by 2x, 3x, 4x or more on your crypto gains or your stock portfolio, you can be drawing from that right now and choosing to not go back to work, which brings the unemployment numbers way down because they're no longer being counted. So again, when government gives you money, it's like house money. You're gambling, but with no risk. And I think that the construction price has a lot to do, probably more than just about anything, has a lot to do with the shortage as well. Like, for example, they were talking in the article about it's hard to build a townhouse or an apartment complex or a single family home with like 2 bedrooms. Instead, they want to build a 4 or 5 bedroom home with a couple of bathrooms, etc. It's not a good starter home. Well, when you have a construction crew that you now have to pay more to come to work because of the constraint on the supply of workers, because again, people aren't going to work like they used to, you have to pay them more. That drives up your costs. The bottleneck in the supply chain drives up costs on everything from lumber to windows to vinyl, etc. That's driving up the cost of a house in the house construction project. So if the home builder wants to make any kind of profit whatsoever, they've really got no choice but to build something a little fancier, a little bigger, a little nicer for maybe the second home for a person, or not a starter home, let's say. Knock down an old starter home built in the 70s and build a brand new 2022 shiny mint condition 5-bedroom house that they can sell for a lot more, and they can make a better profit on it, make it more worth their while. Plus, one last idea I had for this is that when, just slightly off topic, but I think that this pertains, when you've got tens of thousands of people crossing the border illegally being sent into this country to pretty much go and wait for their court date, and they're essentially being treated as refugees and getting a stipend for living expenses. Well, when you have a stipend, you can basically the housing market is going to be tighter because you're going to be filling up more houses with these immigrants, and there's going to be less choices, less supply, and we're already low on our supply for housing, for apartments as well as for houses, as they went into in this NPR article and many other articles out there. But those are a few ideas I had. We've got the main ones, I think, are that the supply chain bottleneck is driving up costs, as well as the mandated quarantines that people had to go to, and they weren't producing new houses, for example, or new lumber, or et cetera, et cetera. have driven up costs for all kinds of other things, including workers to employ. So now you've got to pay a premium to get people to come and work for your company. So those are my thoughts on the American housing shortage. I would love to hear your thoughts, though. Let me know what you think. Let me know if I'm wrong. And in the meantime, don't forget to click that subscribe button right there. And don't forget to post some comments in the video notes below. Don't forget to visit us at Follow Me 11B on Twitter and Facebook, and the real Follow Me at Instagram and Rumble, and we will see you all on the next video.